Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about the king of incels, Jordan Peterson. All right, so what does the king of incels, Jordan Peterson, have to do with Dungeons and Dragons? A lot. Let's talk about it. So first of all, Jordan Peterson just got a lot of attention on the internet. Now, he got a spike of attention. Jordan Pete's been getting attention on the internet for like 20 years. That dude, so basically, if you don't know I'll define my terms here. If you don't know who Jordan Peterson is, he is a highly influential conservative Canadian professor who said something that really resonated with modern young men. Right? And by the way, I've read his books. I think he's an interesting guy. I think he's a thinker. I certainly don't agree with everything he has to say, but I think he has some really good points. And what really made him famous was he was like, there's all these activists who are saying, shaking their fists at the government, and frankly, Jordan Peterson is a Canadian professor who talks about America and never talks about Canada. And the reason why is essentially Russell Brand. He's British. He talks about American politics constantly. So the reality is that just the shape of the world is America scratches its butt. The world pays attention, right? Canada does something significant, nobody even knows what happened, right? It's the shape of the world, and the reason why I bring it up is Dungeons & Dragons is kind of like that too. Dungeons & Dragons was born in America, everybody knows its name. Go over to OSE, go over to any other indie or OSR tabletop role-playing game, you couldn't pay somebody $1,000 to tell you what a single one of their names are, right? It's just the shape of the world. All right, so Jordan Peterson is talking about American politics. And he said, "Hey, you got all these activists, and they're crying out the thing of the week, right? And saying, oh, hey, this is important, make this change, and shaking their fist at the government and shaking their fists at corporations." And he's like, "Hey, clean your room before you change the world," right? And it was powerful because everybody's like, "Whoa, wait a second, what's that mean?" And he's like, "Hey, you saying all this stuff is wrong, but what are you doing to fix your own life, right?" And he was talking about that. Absolutely true, right? One of the biggest things that just terrified people was they were like, activists don't vote. Generally, a lot of them. It's debatable the number, but it's not a small number. It's at least 33% according to certain polls. It might even be the majority of them. They're like, people will go out and protest and then not vote. And everybody's like, "Are you kidding?" People are out here with sign of the week and protest of the week, and they're not even showing up at the polls. And data scientists are like, "Yeah, that's right, right." And so he was like, "Hey, slow your roll, shut your mouth, and why don't you fix your own life before you ask institutions to fix their processes?" And it resonated. Man, did it resonate? Okay. And one of the groups it resonated with, one of the reasons why Jordan Peterson is now called by multiple mainstream organizations the king of incels. By the way, if you don't know what an incel is, it's an involuntary celibate. I think they're almost exclusively male. Tell me if I'm wrong about that. So it's usually a male involuntary celibate, and they're massively discussed in mainstream media today. All right, so how does this land in our lap, right? So recently, Jordan Peterson was called out by, was actually asked on camera. He's like, why do you speak for incels, right? And he literally and they said, and the reason we're asking you this is the movie Don't Worry Darling by Olivia Wilde, starring Harry Styles and Chris Pine, right, say that they based their movie around you as a villain aspect, right? Now, what's that got to do with D&D? Well, if you don't know, Don't Worry Darling is the major Dungeons & Dragons adversary movie in the history of humanity. It stands more against Dungeons & Dragons than anything, and it's because of its primary star, one of its primary stars, Harry Styles. So Harry Styles, he says he spit on Chris Pine. The whole internet, actually a ton of people on the internet, absolutely confirmed what he said in New York. He said, "I went to Venice to spit on Harry Styles, on Chris Pine's." Now, Chris Pine is Elgin the Bard. And so when Harry Styles said, "Hey, your star of Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves I don't like him, and I'm going to spit on him. He spit on every member of the D&D community, and there ain't a member of the D&D community who cares about the honor of Gary Gygax, cares about every player who ever played a bard, cares about the honor of Dungeons & Dragons now, that was not massively offended. Now, I am massively offended. I have made a decision to never see another Harry Styles movie as long as I live, because I understand he has put himself in the position of antagonism to the entire Dungeons & Dragons community, and shows disrespect and, in my opinion, hatred toward every single one of us. That's a fact, in my humble opinion. All right? And I will never forget it. I will never forget it. And many people now are, determining where they're going to stand with all of this, as Don't Worry, Darling becomes the number one Dungeons & Dragons adversary film in the world, right? So, and also, cast Jordan Peterson as a villain, right? So here's the thing. So what happens is Jordan Peterson breaks down crying, and he says, isn't everybody supposed to have a voice? Isn't everybody supposed to have tolerance, right? Isn't everybody supposed to get a chance in countries that have freedom and liberty? And these incels are a group that everyone is comfortable mocking, everyone is comfortable ignoring, everybody is comfortable leaving them out, and I'm not. And that's why I'm crying today, and that's why I'm upset, is because incels should have a voice too, right? And honestly, what I think is really fascinating is I don't think he's wrong. And so we had this period, and you can go back and you will see it all over streaming, where where male dungeon masters who had run 100% male games for a long time, right? Where they went and actually got entire groups of all women player characters. This happened a lot, right? And so I think we may be reaching a point in Dungeons & Dragons where we have lots of female dungeon masters, but they may say, hey, in order to have representation, why don't I go get like 4 or 5 incels and run a Dungeons & Dragons game so that they're included, right? And so that they can have a voice in Dungeons & Dragons as well. I'm for inclusion, and I'm for inclusion and for progressiveness. And I really feel, if you understand Gary Gygax, he was doing inclusion and progressiveness in Dungeons & Dragons from the gate. From 1974, it spiked in 1983, where he made sure that everybody understood that Dungeons & Dragons was for all genders and all races in the Saturday morning 1980s cartoon, right? And so I think we've reached a point where you may actually start to see female dungeon masters getting entire tables of incels and saying, hey, Dungeons & Dragons for everybody, and I think everybody should get a chance to play this game. And even though you're an incel and the world is laughing at you, and the only champion you have is Jordan Peterson, hey, welcome to Dungeons & Dragons. And that's new, that's fresh, and that's Dungeons & Dragons. Inclusivity even in the places where you least expect it. So I think the catch-all here is, boy, I really don't like Harry Styles. I really feel he disrespected every single member of the Dungeons & Dragons community when he spit on Elgin the Bard. I will never forget it, and I promise to never see a film with him in it. I don't care who publishes it. I'm done. I'm done with him. Like, you don't spit on Elgin the Bard and the D&D community, forget it, right? And the reality is, I'm super happy to be a member of the D&D community, because the D&D community can really look at inclusivity and progressiveness in every direction. And I think we're coming to a point where inclusivity and progressiveness through Dungeons & Dragons may be more on the bleeding edge than any other group on the planet. I really think we're there. And all of it is to honor Gary Gygax. All that's my humble opinion. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.